How's it going, everybody? Welcome to LUMIX Live this week. We've got a fun conversation about the S1 Mark IIe. Probably one of the cameras that we haven't really talked a ton about since the announcement a few months ago. So I wanted to, kind of dive into, what is, kind of the story about the S1 Mark IIe. Where does it fit? What does it do? What its benefits over an S1II series camera are, what its similarities to the S1 Mark II or even the S1R Mark II. So I've got my S1 Mark IIe hooked up. We're going to go through a bunch of the stuff that this camera can do, kind of hopefully highlight a lot of what this camera offers within our lineup for those that, maybe you're not ready to go up to an S1 Mark II, maybe the resolution's not that big of a key, maybe you're looking for certain capabilities and features within your camera, and just kind of put it into perspective. So yeah, we're going to go through that. I've got everything hooked up so we can walk through and, kind of answer some questions. So like always, if you have questions for me, for LUMIX, make sure to tag at LUMIX USA like you see in my comment above. And that just helps me see them so I can, get in and kind of address some of them. Yeah, we'll kind of go from there. It's a general open, so if you got questions about the cameras in general, feel free to ask them. I think you'll see by the end of this stream how much even the S1 Mark IIe has. For those that want to get, up into the new series, get some of the benefits and not necessarily have to go full bore to the highest end that we offer in the system. But before we get into that, I want to remind those of you in the US about LUMIX Pro services. We have the red tier, which is free. So if you've purchased a LUMIX camera, and it's got to be a new camera, you can register yourself for LUMIX Pro services with the QR code right below me. That'll get you registered. And that's going to get you your added 3-year warranty on top of the standard one that comes with it. But if you're someone who prefers higher levels of service and support, maybe you're a working professional, maybe you're someone who just prefers to have that extra net of safety for your purchases, you could always take a look at the Platinum tier. That gets you the 3-year extended warranty as well. But on top of that, you're going to get a number of added benefits. You're going to get 2-day repairs with next day shipping both ways, so it minimizes downtime. You're going to get 20% off out of warranty repairs. So if you happen to have any kind of accidental drops, breaks, damages, things like that, you're going to get a break on the service and support for things that wouldn't be covered under warranty. You also get annual sensor cleanings, EVF cleaning, lens calibration, firmware updates, like the kind of general maintenance stuff that maybe you don't want to do yourself. Maybe you'd rather have us handle for you, so it's, one less thing you got to worry about. But you also have access to a membership hotline, so if you prefer to speak to somebody for, kind of service and support type questions, that's available Monday through Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Time. And you get the welcome gift, which I believe is still the Peak Design strap with the registration. So definitely take a look at those. Link is down in the description, and the QR code's right below me as well. So if you're in the US, I encourage you to take a look at those. All right, let's take a look here through some of the questions. Remember, tag at LUMIX USA so I can see your question. If I don't see LUMIX USA, I probably am not going to see your question, so sorry. But the first one was, how about instead of recording proxies, record portrait at HD for Instagram and other social media? This is definitely a really cool idea. Have to give credit where credit's due. It's definitely an interesting way to approach recording something like a proxy file. It makes certain assumptions, that as far as workflow goes, which can be great for some, may not work for others. The one thing I'd say is that from everything I've read, that type of system that is out in the market, you're still having to shoot 16:9 for it. So while it's cool, OpenGate is still far superior. And I know a lot of people have been going back and forth about, kind of the linear resolution increase of OpenGate versus 16:9 or 17:9. But I would say until you've used it, and I think this echoes a lot of people that have gotten in and started using OpenGate and actually using it for this purpose, not necessarily anamorphic use. Until you actually get in and use it and realize how much more resolution there actually is, it's a much better system shooting open gate. But the idea of being able to store out a proxy that's in a different resolution or a different aspect ratio is definitely something that I know myself, Matt, and others have brought up to engineering and planning teams. So it's a good question. So the competition released cameras. Yep, it's been a very busy week for the imaging industry, and I think honestly, I just want to take a second and acknowledge that this is amazing for the industry across the board. I think when you look at any kind of major advancements, things that push each company forward, things that are borrowed or changed upon or kind of advanced, it's good for you, the consumer, the person that's buying the cameras, that's going to use them. It's great. However, looking at ways things are deployed, looking at what tools and features are most important to you or your style of content creation, putting everything in context is, I think, something that it's easy to knee-jerk react to, the latest and greatest, and that's cool because we all like gear, and I mean that's one of the reasons why we have a lot of these conversations. We love talking about gear, but I think the idea of upgrades to match and all of this stuff, like, let's face it, if anything, that whole conversation is flipped. There's not a ton match needed. You look at a lot of things and it's only just catching up to what we've been doing for quite a while. So, yeah, you can always look at things from two different sides of the same penny. But we still have a lot of things, and we're going to go over a lot of these things here, like with the S1II, and that's one of the reasons why I want to talk about the S1II. There's a lot of stuff we do still that the others aren't even dreaming of or thinking of or offering to you as a user, because we don't think we know more than you do as creators. So if we can do it, we throw it into the camera and we've got it there for you. Let's see here. Just here for the fun. Yeah, this is going to be a fun stream. DJ, I hope Lumix can reconsider SD card speed friendly ProRes RAW speeds and somehow find a way to support those on SD exclusive like the S5II. So that is part of something that I want to talk about today, is actually like kind of explaining ProRes RAW within the cameras and why certain cards have to be used, why SD cards from a standard are just not suited for it. And I'll cover those things with the S1II and kind of explain that to you guys. So let's see here. Curious, which one of Viltrox's lenses would you love to see? Would you love seeing first on the L mount? To be fair, I'm not super well versed on Viltrox's lens offering. I did see Rhett's video about Viltrox lenses, and that's kind of started my, kind of looking further into it. And to be honest, I've had a lot of other things that I'm in the process of doing, so I haven't had a lot of time to just kind of like go look at that stuff. But I definitely want to take a look at it and kind of see what in general their offering is, because it's great. It's another addition into the L-Mount Alliance. It's another offering for all of us across the board, even myself. Yes, I have access to the LUMIX line of lenses. I have access to a bunch of Sigma lenses as well. It'd be cool to check out some of the Viltrox lenses as well and maybe talk about them here on the stream for all of you once they do get to that point. So, we'll kind of see from there. So yeah, it's kind of a non-answer for you. Sorry, DJ. Any firmware updates for the S1II coming soon? Even if I did know, I couldn't tell you at this time. We don't comment on future firmware or product or anything like that on this stream. When it's public, we'll talk. Like when anything ever goes public, we'll talk about it here on the stream. So. And then last question before we jump into the S1 Mark IIe. Sorry to go off subject, but I have a question about my G9 Mark II that's driving me crazy, trying to figure it out. What or where is the lens function / focus button on an interchangeable lens? That is a good question. Do I have my 24-60 here? I don't know where my 24 to 60 is. So, the lens function button, on that particular one, I think it's the 100 to 400 has a lens function, or no, the 200 millimeter had a lens function button, so that's probably an easier example. So some lenses have a function button literally on the lens itself that can be programmed. Depends on the optic. It depends on the different mount that you're using. So whether you're on L mount or Micro Four Thirds, but usually those buttons, it's taking the idea from the DSLR era where your super telephoto lenses had a button on it which would be like a stop focus button, right? Or you could, I think, if I remember correctly, it's been a long time, you used to be able to like program those to like activate focus or things like that, or preset focus distance, things among that nature. The modern cameras, since most of the buttons, at least the vast majority of the buttons on the Lumix cameras, can be reprogrammed to pretty much whatever you want. Most things, not whatever you want, but it's a very large list. I think it's like 49 options, 50 options, something along those lines. It's just an option to give you another button to be able to press to change something. Like on the 24 to 60, one of the big things that we get a lot of feedback on is that function button is used often for changing your subject detection. So what subject you're telling the system to detect. And that's a really nice big benefit. Personally, I use the function button for things like crop zoom or hybrid zoom. If it's hybrid zoom, you can press it so it'll toggle hybrid zoom, and then you're within that system. If you use it for crop zoom, I click that, turn it on, and then while I'm in autofocus, my control ring, or what is commonly the manual focus ring, now becomes the zoom effect selector for crop zoom. So I can, on the fly, be adjusting my range. So that's what it is. So on the G9 Mark II, it's most likely, well, it's not most likely, it is because of the at bare minimum the 200 millimeter. I can't remember if any of the other lenses that we have has it. I think, and I would need to double check this, I think if you use some of the Olympus or the OM lenses too that have a function button, I think it maps on there as well, because I think that's part of the spec for Micro Four Thirds. I honestly can't remember off the top of my head. But yeah, just another option for you as a user. I know I've been asking for new contrast, constant preview system to be added to the S5II. Here I am asking one more time. Thanks. Yeah, no, I've pressed that pretty hard with the engineering team that I would love to see that brought to the other cameras if possible. Hybrid zoom clarification. If the function is on, crop zooming begins as early as the zoom ring is pulled. Yes and no. You have a couple of options for that. So crop zoom, well, there's two separate things. Crop zoom, when it's turned on, is independent of the ring or the focus that you're doing. If you're using a zoom lens, crop zoom, you would have to go in and rotate or use a screen selectable option to then apply the cropped effect to it. Hybrid zoom, which is going to be for zoom lenses, that has an option to either start at the ultra wide, so it starts immediately the second you start rotating the ring, or you can set it where it delays the start. So your ultra wide angle kind of stays, if you're using like a 14 to 28, it'll stay 14, 15, and I think it's like 16 is where it starts. I'd have to double check. And then it starts adding the multiplication for the crop effect on there. Yeah. Is the SmallRig A2 profile in the pipeline to be available for the S9? Honestly, no clue. Even if I did know, again, that's future firmware, future product, future planning stuff that we don't and can't talk about on the stream. And then the last one, ProRes RAW and S5II even on SSD, will be so good now with it being supported in DaVinci Resolve. I don't know if the S5II is ever going to get ProRes RAW. I don't know the actual backing behind it, but I don't believe the S5II or the S5II can get ProRes RAW. So yeah, it's probably just not going to be there. So, where was the other point there? Oh, okay, yeah, you guys are just going back and forth on that. So, yeah, let's talk about the S1 Mark II-E. So, for those that don't know, the S1 Mark II-E is, one, it's the camera that I use for our live streaming. I've been using it for, well, ever since it came out. But the S1 Mark II-E is our entry line in the S1II series of cameras. And what are the S1II series of cameras? Well, that's the new design, the new chassis, and the improved capabilities that weren't possible on the S5 platform. And I call them platforms specifically because there's a number of things that are core differences between these two series that enable a bunch of functionality that you just can't do on the older, on the previous generation or the other series of camera that we offer. So, in effect, it's a very similar sensor to the S5 Mark II X in that, as far as image and performance-wise, you're going to get very similar characteristics out of it. So, why would you go from an S1, from an S5 II or a 2X to an S1II-E? That's a pretty common question that I see in various different forums. Well, if we start on the exterior of the camera, and I'll use my, I'm going to do it this way. I'll use my S1R2 as an example. So this will kind of hit a couple of points. So to start with, the S1 Mark II-E utilizes the new chassis design. So that means that it has a number of added functionality. That means that you've got the shutter closing mechanism if you want it. You have the new chassis design with the different locking top dials here. So you've got your mode dial here. You got your mode dial here that's lockable. You've got your drive dial here that's lockable. More importantly, as far as general use goes, you've got the 5.8 million dot viewfinder. You've got the external lock switch, so you can lock out various different customized settings on the chassis. You've got the photo video slow and quick switch here under the drive dial. So this is going to get you the ability to have the camera be completely independent between photography and videography. So those photographers, you've got the nice ability that, you know, if you don't want to do anything with video, you won't see the video options in here. If you're in video, you're not going to have to go through photo options or photo menus. They're all hidden behind the mode that you're in. The other big benefit going to an S1II-E from an S5 II series is that you also get the new rear screen. So you get the fully articulating rear screen, and those of you that have used S1IIs or you've been following any of that, none of this is new. This is what is added to the new series. You also get access to CF Express Type B as well as an SD card, and the CF Express Type B is a core component here as to why the new cameras can do things that the S1 or the S5 series just can't do. So from an exterior perspective, you're getting a lot of what I call quality of life improvements. So, you know, the rear screen, the better viewfinder, the different control improvements there, while not being too dissimilar to the S5 II series, you get a lot of additional control that the new chassis just gives us. And it's a newer design language too, so you get a little bit more shift there. You also get access to, you know, front video record button. If you're recording video, it's great. And if you're going to be doing photography, you can be like me, and I program this to real-time LUT on the camera. So if I want to be cycling through, I can just press that once where my thumb is going to be, and then I use my dials to move through it. Inside is where you see probably a decent bit more differences here. And this goes more to like what I was saying, where it's a similar sensor. It's not necessarily the exact same sensor as the S5 II series. And we'll go through that in a second because I see a couple conversations that I want to address in here, actually. Is there any difference regarding the AF performance between an S1II-E and an S1II? No, they're the same autofocusing system. shouting at us. The caps lock doesn't have to be on for me to see it. You can tag at LUMIX USA and I can see it. Is the rolling shutter faster on the S1II since it has a faster processor? No. That is a very common misconception. Processor speed has nothing to do with rolling shutter or readout speed or sensor speed. That is hardware. That is a sensor's hardware and how it reads out based on the different operating modes. So what that means is that your rolling shutter is going to be pretty similar to an S5 Mark II. And I say pretty similar because the measurement figures, the way people measure it when you view on a lot of the other outlets, there's variance between them. So I say it's pretty similar because you could be within a couple, points of a millisecond between each other. It means that it's going to be pretty much the same, very similar to an S5 Mark II. So you're not doing this upgrade to get a faster sensor. If you want to do that, that's where you go to the S1 Mark II. But knowing that there are a ton of situations and a ton of users that, maybe speed isn't the number one priority. Maybe, you need some of the other features that we've added that we'll talk about. Those become much more important for your style of work. This is a solid option for it. Speed is great, and I love having really fast speed, but for some people that comes in at a cost that maybe you're not prepared to spend because maybe it's not going to provide a big enough difference for you. If I film talking head content and that's all I don't do sports, I don't do, fast motion, I don't do wildlife. Maybe I'm not into documentary filmmaking. I'm a corporate videographer and I do headshots and that's my job. An S1II is probably going to be overkill for you. Honestly, a lot of the cameras may be overkill for you. An S5II or an S5IIX is probably perfectly fine for you still. But you may find that having the new designed rear screen, maybe being able to record in a higher quality internally without having to go to an SSD, those become the benefits for you. So it's about putting these things into categories for yourself that make the difference for you. The internet's going to shout and yell about what you should be looking for, what you need as a filmmaker, but the only person that knows what you need as a videographer, filmmaker, photographer, cinematographer, whatever you are, you're the only one that can make that decision. I highly encourage you to not let everybody else tell you what you need as a filmmaker to succeed. But all of that being said, the image quality that you can get out of an S1II is going to be superior to what you can get out of the camera, right out of the camera on the cards, than you would get on an S5 Mark II or an S5 Mark IIX. And that comes down to some of the revisions that we've made, the memory card change, so being able to support CF Express Type B, and ways that we know how to work with this version of the sensor that aren't necessarily guaranteed in the previous camera, in the S1II series. We're going to say, I don't think... is there any evidence regarding the sensor readouts, sensor speed? Are you sure? I'm pretty sure it's also processing a C4K 60 without a crop. So that's one of the things let's jump onto the camera and talk about. So to start with, on the S5 Mark II series, if you want to do 4K 60, you have to have the camera in Super 35 or APS-C crop. That's giving you roughly about a 1.5 times crop onto the sensor. And I can show you that by coming in here and pulling up my 4K 60. So if I go into resolution, let's go to 4K, let's go to frame rate, let's go to 60, and let's take a look at the options here. So we see 4K 60p. So we go into here, and I forgot, OBS acts really funny when I change frame rates, so I have to remember to do this. So start with here, and yeah, I'm in ProRes, but it doesn't matter. So I'm in ProRes here, and you'll see that it's APS-C. I can do APS-C or I can do pixel to pixel, which pixel to pixel on APS-C on a 24 megapixel sensor for 4K is a very minor change. But I don't have access to full. Now, that's because this sensor needs to be in Super 35. There are a ton of cameras still on the market that to do 4K 60 you need to be in Super 35 for. And that's just generational for sensor hardware. In the S1 Mark IIe, we addressed this within this hardware, given that you're not going to get 16:9 4K 60 out of this sensor. It's just not possible, by offering a different 4K option. And that's what the CS 4K, or the 2:4:1 ratio option, is within the S1 Mark IIe, as well as the S1 Mark II. So when we come into this, you'll see that I now have an option here for, in this case, because again, I'm in ProRes, I've got 4096 by 1728, which is a 2:4:1 ratio in 60 frame. But I want you to keep an eye on this part right here, where the stickers are on my laptop. So now we're now looking at the screen that's being shown through the camera is showing you 16:9 in Super 35. But now if I change this to CS 4K, you'll see that now I'm getting the full width of the sensor. So let's change that, and let's go to APS-C. Let's change this back into full. Now you see a massive difference here. You see where before my vertical resolution was cutting off somewhere up here, and my height resolution was cutting off somewhere around here because of Super 35, and I was losing all of the width for that frame. CS 4K at 60 frame gives me the full sensor width, so now I'm recording at the full width of what the 35mm sensor offers me, and I'm actually getting more height than Super 35. So if I were to take this and crop 16:9 out of the middle of this frame, what you're gonna see, and actually I didn't test this beforehand, so I'm gonna see if it does it. So what I can do is, if I go to frame markers and I go and I turn on, let's change this to 16:9. Now if I turn my frame markers on, what you see is that I get to retain that height that the CS option gets me, and I can still crop out some of the width, which effectively, if I do my math right, is roughly about a 1.3-ish crop if you were to shoot CS 4K 60 and then want to crop it into 16:9 for your deliverable. So that means that compared to an S5 Mark II or a Mark IIX, I'm getting more real estate on 4K 60p. Does that mean that it's as good as shooting in full frame 4K 60p for a 16:9 deliverable? Not always, but it is a step up over the S5 Mark II and the Mark IIX. Or if you know that you're going to be delivering in 2:4:1 ratio, you want to deliver in that CinemaScope, just shoot it in CinemaScope and you're good to go, and you've got 60 frame. Let me take a look at some of the questions before I continue on. When shooting CS 4K 60p and crop both sides to get 17:9, it's roughly the same size as APS-C 60 FPS. No, so hopefully what I just showed you there explains the difference. Is you're actually getting more height in CS 4K when you want to shoot for 60 frame. So it still is a larger area than the S5 Mark II or the S5 Mark IIX or other cameras that have to crop at 60 frame within this generation of hardware. And that was something we were able to do within the new camera for an improvement. And I can even come in here and I can throw, if I do another frame marker, let's turn 17:9 on as well. So now if I've got the two of them on there, now you can see the difference there. So 17:9, you're just going to be a little bit wider. You still get the height compared to going in and recording this in standard 4K at 60 frame. You see how much more of that gets cropped out when I'm in 16:9 4K versus if I come in and I'm in CS 4K. You get a lot more real estate across the board than you do in standard 16:9. Let's see, one of the other questions. Does AEL unlock when switching between MF and continuous AF? Auto exposure lock. I don't think it does. I'd have to look into that one for you. Dave says, I like the S1II over my S5II for the screen, which I wish was matte and didn't have reflections. Closing shutter, ProRes RAW, it seems faster at startup compared to the S5II. Yeah, it's a lot faster in general across the board. It's a faster camera. Is there a suggestion tutorial on how to tether Lumix cameras with Capture One? Thanks. There isn't. I can probably do one next week for you, Brendan. I'd be happy to do one next week, which actually next week's live stream is going to be on Friday, because I'll be traveling on Thursday. But yeah, so we're going to shift it one day. But I'll do a tethering walkthrough for Capture One next Friday. I have the S1II. I was using the eye dynamic high, but the shadows look very grainy. Will color shading compensation help? No. Realistically, don't use eye dynamic. Eye dynamic, yes, you can use it. It can work well because of what it does to try to balance the shadows and highlights. It's basically adding a curve onto the footage that you capture. But in reality, using something like eye dynamic, if you're very sensitive to things like shadow noise, is only going to make it worse, because you're artificially lifting the shadow information. It'd be the same thing if you take that footage, you put it into software, and then you add a curve to your video file or your still, and you just lift your shadows. The better way to deal with it is, if you really need to work on your shadow and highlight information, is to shoot in log or some version of log, and then do your grading there, because you're going to have much more flexibility, or work in a different format. Eye dynamic is cool because it's there, but anything, I would say any kind of serious filmmaking or video creation, you're not going to want to use features like that because they burn it into the footage. You'll have much better results doing it in post, and maybe shifting what color profile you use to edit with. Orange says, is there a dummy battery with DTAP available for the BLK22? Not from Lumix. From Lumix, we have the DCC18, which is to USB-C. I think Kondor Blue makes one to DTAP, but we don't, because we can't test it, we don't manufacture it, we can't formally recommend third-party accessories like that. So if you do decide to use one, it is at your own risk. Should anything happen to the camera, it's not something that we're going to cover under warranty. Brennan, perfect timing. I have a shoot next week in which I plan to tether. Thanks, Sean. Cool. All right, so let's get back to the S1 Mark IIe. So as far as this setup goes, you know, you're getting a lot of this benefit. We talked about 60 frame over the S5 Mark II and the Mark II X. And that's a really nice benefit. But you'll also notice one of the other benefits, which is why I've been in ProRes, is that I can record all of these ProRes options in camera. Now, while we do consider USB SSD as an in-camera recording because it's being generated by the camera, it's not being generated by an external recorder, we fully understand that there are some users that may not want to work with an external SSD. We know that some users have, you know, some hesitations about USB-C cables or cable, you know, externally being plugged in. And it's a valid concern for some users. But what's great about using the CF Express card with this is that, again, I have access to all of my ProRes codecs. So if I change this back to any and any, which opens up all of the resolutions and the frame rates, and then I go to the options here for codec, let's just take a look at 422HQ. So 422HQ in ProRes gives me all the way up to 5.8K 30 frame within this camera, and that's going to be full sensor width matched to the height, so you're going to get 5776 by 3056 at 30 frame. That's Apple ProRes 422HQ. And what you'll see is that in order to get the quality that 422HQ requires, you're at 1.9 gigabit per second. That's a huge file. So if I go in and I select this, and now we take a look at the card, you'll notice, and let me make sure I formatted this card so we can take a look at the recording size, you'll see that an empty 320 gig CF Express card at 1.9 gigabits is going to get you 21 minutes and 41 seconds worth of recording. Not a ton of recording time, but you're getting a major improvement in image quality because now you're moving into ProRes, which is way less compressed. It has different characteristics for things like noise reduction. Because it's a different compression versus H.265 and H.264, which are compressions, you have it's a very different look to the image. You'll see a lot of people will like shooting in ProRes for a couple of reasons. One, it's a pretty universal format for various different types of production. It's relatively easy on your computer when you're going to be working with it, considering I know at least on the Mac side and definitely on the Windows side, most graphics cards have no problem supporting it. You have access to work with it in things like Premiere and Resolve and Final Cut. So it's pretty standard across the board. It's easy to work with. But you get that improvement in image quality because now you're way less compressed. It's an intra codec, so everything it's an all-I codec as opposed to having to go to MOV and have to select an all-I codec. So you get a lot bigger benefits here. But we also, within the S1II have a number of other options. So you've got 30 frame, 24 frame. We have a Super 35 4x3 option, so that's going to be for the some more anamorphic lenses that are designed for Super 35 coverage. So now you've got a 4x3 ratio that's 3.3K. You've got the C4K 60p option, which will be APS-C. You got the 30 frame options. You have that CS 4K option that I mentioned that goes up to 60 frame. But you even have full HD options. Now, someone mentioned before about memory cards and wanting to be able to get things like ProRes onto an SD card. And this is something that the S5 Mark II X can do. You can record ProRes in full HD to the SD cards. So if you're only doing HD work, yeah, you have an option for ProRes, but I want you to take a look at the bit rates here. So now, yes, this is HQ, but your 4K 422 HQ is 729 megabits per second. That is a ton of data in this general kind of world. So you get a lot of data throughput that you need to require. SD cards have a rating, V60, V90, and then there's a ton of other ones too. But a V90 card at the 729 megabit per second is at the ragged edge of what the sustainable write speed is for an SD card. So in order to make sure that you're not having any kind of potential drop because of bitrate, because if for some reason as you're recording a ton of information hits that card at once, or as you fill a card up, cards get slower. If the card is not able to really maintain its full specification, which also happens within production variants, this could be a very challenging option to record on an SD card. So that's why it requires moving to CF Express or going to an SSD. But when you look at the same option in 24 frame in full HD, you're at 181 megabit per second. That's well within the spec for SD cards. So you do have some options, but anything over full HD, if we wanted to, even if we could, and the memory cards had faster speed, which maybe hopefully it's not a surprise to many. SD cards aren't going to get any faster than V90 as far as everything I can see, because they're already talking about a newer spec for it. That's why cameras like the S5 Mark II and the Mark II X just can't do them. So if you're a creator and you need a video content creation and you want to get access to ProRes, just basic ProRes, the S1 Mark IIe could be a major upgrade for you if you're not someone who likes to mount, SSDs or have to rig your camera up. If you like to keep much more simple and small, this can be a big improvement to you in your decisions as you're taking a look when it comes to internal capabilities. Now, the other main option, and this is probably the biggest news of the week, at least in my view, this is pretty big for my interest, is that DaVinci Resolve finally added support for ProRes RAW to edit with. I know I could go back a couple of streams ago where I was like, hell would have to freeze over before that happens. Well, I'm wrong, and Resolve now supports ProRes RAW, which is pretty cool. This means that any of you that have a camera that has a camera that has ProRes RAW recording internally, you're good to go. You can, if you like working in Resolve, cool, you can start editing in Resolve. You have some controls in it. You have about the same controls roughly that you have with Final Cut. If you're a Premiere editor, like I use Premiere for anything video that I edit. I use Octopus RAW as a plugin that I bought. That gives me a lot of control over the RAW files that I want to work with, if I'm ever going to really work with RAW. But you'll notice that RAW is a very, in this format, just in ProRes RAW, is a very heavy format. It's 4.2 gigabit per second. I want to make sure I get that right because I got that wrong on one of the other streams as well. Gigabyte versus gigabit, or megabyte versus megabit. So it's 4.2 gigabit per second. To put that in perspective, if I'm at RAW HQ 5.8K 24 frame, and we switch into this mode, and now I look at my memory card, I got 12 minutes of recording. 12 minutes and 19 seconds worth of recording on a 320 gig CF Express card. It is a very large file size. And for a number of users, you may not actually need RAW HQ. In fact, the vast majority of us are probably never going to need RAW HQ. You're probably good with using just ProRes RAW. You'll see that you can reduce those down. You can get to 2.3, 2.8. You get half the size of what the HQ option gives you. And that's going to get me closer to 18 and a half minutes of recording on a 320 gig card. But why do I talk about this? Why do I talk about RAW in this camera? Well, for one, we were one of the first cameras, mirrorless cameras, to offer RAW HQ internally, or RAW internally in the cameras. With the GH7, we added that, and then now we've got it in the S1II series. The RAW format, for those that maybe you're not, how do I phrase this? Maybe you're someone who doesn't like the way cameras process for things like H.264 or H.265, because H.265, if you take a look at a bunch of different cameras on the market, H.265 can look very different between all the different manufacturers. Some have a really good process at generating an H.265 image, and I'll raise our hand for that. Others have a pretty soft and mushy version of H.265, because maybe they take a benefit of the fact that H.265 can hide noise. Maybe you're just not wanting to deal with any of that. You want to actually have all of the control, or a ton of the control, in your hands as someone working with the image. Well, RAW gives you that. And just because we do ProRes RAW in the camera doesn't mean that if you would prefer the much smaller file sizes of Blackmagic RAW, you could pick up a video assist, and you could work with a video assist and be able to shoot B-RAW over HDMI into one of these as well. So you have those options at your fingers. But the important thing is that you have a really solid option to just get better image quality on the go. And this is in a camera that you don't lose stabilization, you don't lose image stabilization. This is a pixel-to-pixel option within our system, so you're getting actually true RAW. There are some out there that are doing RAW, but they're debayering first, and then they're line skipping to generate a full field of view RAW format, which then results in really soft and, kind of not really RAW. It just happens to have a RAW name on it. So this gives you the closest thing you can get to an actual RAW format, or compressed RAW format within the camera. Those that are going to say, well, what about Cine DNG and all that kind of stuff? Nobody wants those ultra large files. You think ProRes RAW is a heavy file? Look at a Cine DNG file. They're even heavier, and they're a lot harder to work with. So this gives you a really solid benefit. Now, one of the questions that I did see come in, which was, does cropless EIS work with ProRes RAW? So when we go in, we can all see I have 5.8K 24 frame RAW selected right now. if I go into the options for stabilization, you'll see that the EIS option cannot be used. Now, this is because EIS, in general, EIS has to window onto the sensor somewhat, whether it's our cropless, which uses the area outside of the sensor, or non-cropless, which has to window into the sensor. That is going to cause some issues in general. So you're going to run into where either you have to interpolate, resolution, which is a big no-go when you're talking in RAW. Or honestly, in general, you shouldn't be interpolating resolutions anyway to go higher than you have to. So if you want to get stabilization, you want to get leading stabilization, our optic and our sensor stabilization is going to be way better than what you're going to see from pretty much anybody else out there. But if you're doing handheld static shots, you do still have access to Boost IS, which this is the option for being able to stabilize and basically push more power to the stabilizer to make it function like it does in stills, so that you can mimic tripod or monopod locked off shots. Second, you go to move the camera, make sure you turn this off, but this is one of those other tools that we have within the camera for you. But then also, because if you're going to be shooting in ProRes RAW and maybe you're using anamorphic, like I've got the 40mm SirAI 133 on here, maybe I want to shoot in anamorphic. Well, we still have anamorphic stabilization options, even when shooting in RAW. This means that now, if I need a compact run-and-gun anamorphic tool, or I want to start playing with it, especially because of how inexpensive anamorphic lenses are getting, the fact that you have things like the 40mm anamorphic here, or the 20mm as well, you've got autofocus options as well that will work with our system. And because they're 133, they're going to be designed more for 16:9 ratio, or that's where they're more commonly used. So I can have that full setup to be able to do, a cinematic look, but also still be able to handhold, be able to utilize the highest image quality out of the camera, and I can stabilize it and not have to, worry about the weird effects that stabilizers have if your company doesn't know what they're doing with stabilization for anamorphic. If you happen to be using something that is anamorphic and the camera has a stabilizer in it, turn it off. Now you have a camera that doesn't have stabilization for anamorphic, which means that camera doesn't do anamorphic handheld all that well, because now you're exacerbating all of the issues that come with anamorphic and the rolling shutter, because anamorphic exacerbates rolling shutter effect. Let's jump to a couple of questions here before we continue on. Bluetooth timecode question. How precise is the timecode clock inside the S1II series TXCO? That I'm not sure. I'd have to talk with Matt on that one. I can give him I can check with him great things, and then come back with an answer on next Friday's live stream. Does C4K 60p RAW HQ pixel to pixel equate to the size of Super 35? So that is a good question. Let's jump into this. So I mentioned before that with our RAW option that we have in the cameras, we operate in the pixel to pixel functionality for RAW. We have the strong sense that if you're shooting in RAW, you're looking for the best image quality and the closest that you can get to the actual information coming off the pixel. You would be shooting RAW because you don't want the company's interpretation of what they want you to see in an image. You want to have control over that. So with RAW being pixel to pixel, it means that yes, you're going to have subtle crops on this. Or if you've worked with cinema cameras and higher end video production cameras, this is often called windowing the sensor to get to the resolution. So when you go to C4K 60p in RAW, you are a pixel to pixel 4096 by 2160. This means that when I change this in and we look at it, you see that it is a punch in. Now, what that percentage is, or what that crop factor is roughly Super 35. I mentioned before that if you put the camera into Super 35 and you and then you change it from APS-C to pixel, there's a very subtle punch-in between pixel to pixel and Super 35. It's going to be the same thing here, because pixel to pixel across the board shows you what it's literally 4096 by 2160 pixels is what's recording. So it does have a little bit more of a crop than Super 35, but it's like a point. It's a 0.01 or 0.05 of a crop. It's you can address it as Super 35, is what I would say. So here, Reagan says, "I'm sorry, but I did not. But did I understand something wrong? Does S1II have a 1.3 crop in 4K 60? No, the S1 Mark II is full sensor, 16:9, 4K 60. The S1II has a CS 4K 60p, which is 2:4:1 ratio. But if you take a 16:9 out of that, because maybe that's the timeline you're working on, it effectively comes out around a 1.3-ish crop compared to a 16:9 full sensor height and width readout in 4K 60. Hopefully that clarifies it for you. But the S1 Mark II, not the E, just the Mark II, is full sensor width 4K 60p in 16:9 or 17:9. There's a lot of contradicting information on the processor inside the S1II versus the S52X. Is it the exact same or improved? Is the image processing improved or exact same? There are differences between the two cameras. So based on the fact that our processing is a little different between the two cameras, there are functions that are different between them. It wouldn't be fair to say that they're the exact same. Improved or better utilized, those would probably be more accurate ways to describe the processors. They are L-squared engines, so this is the new engine that we use across the board. But like everything, there can be minor changes, minor shifts, different ways that they're being used, different ways that they're being accessed between different generations. So that, in combined with the totality of the rest of the capabilities that the camera and lens that the camera has, is why you get some, pretty substantial differences here. All right. Wow, it's already been about an hour. So the last thing that I have time to talk about today is ARRI Log. So we launched a little while ago. We launched our licensing from ARRI, the ability to capture ARRI LogC3 within the LUMIX cameras. So if I change this over into a ProRes option, and I'll talk about this in a second, if you launch into a ProRes option, you'll notice that I have the ability to utilize ARRI LogC3. Now, why is this an important thing versus just shooting in Vlog? Well, the big thing here comes down to what kind of workflow do you want to work with? Do you want to work in Vlog, which a number of you are probably used to? You like working in it. It's a pretty straightforward. If you've been working with it for a very long time, it's great. There's a bunch of LUTs designed for it, and you get really solid image performance out of this. This is also one of the reasons why when you shoot RAW, which RAW doesn't actually have a color space, in the same sense that a compressed file does, you can convert raw footage to basically be almost anything you want it to be. That's why when we shoot in ProRes RAW, it shows you in Vlog so that you can use all of your Vlog tools, your LUTs, your previewing LUTs, all that kind of stuff. You can use those tools to work with, and not ARRI LogC3 if you have it unlocked. So ARRI LogC3 is only for the compressed codecs inside the camera. But there's a couple things that are different between shooting ARRI LogC3 versus shooting Vlog. For one, your gray point's different, or your midtones. Vlog is rated for 42 IRE, where ARRI LogC3 is shifted by a couple of points, and you're going to get maybe a little bit better highlight. This could be argued depending on how you edit. You're going to get better highlight performance out of ARRI LogC3. The other, and it's not that you're getting more dynamic range, be very clear on that. ARRI LogC3 versus Vlog does not give you a difference in dynamic range. It's the same way that RAW doesn't give you better dynamic range than non-RAW. You just have more control over the different tones that are in it. But with ARRI LogC3, the benefit here is that if you want to work and emulate the looks that you get out of ARRI cameras, out of some of the most, some of the biggest movies that have been released over the recent decade, if you're really trying to emulate or generate that look from your side, and you don't want to go buy an ARRI camera because maybe you don't have the money for it, or maybe a lot of us probably don't have the money for it at close to $100,000 camera. If that's not something that's in the cards for you, but you want to have that kind of look, well, now when you use ARRI LogC3 in our cameras, it edits the same way. If I'm working with the LUTs, the over 80 LUTs that are available from ARRI to go to 709 that are designed based on their movies and their looks and everything that they have for the LF, or based in ARRI LogC3, you can now just drop those right onto this footage and you're good to go. Now, some will say, well, can't you just use a CST for that and be able to then color match them? Well, you could get close. Media Division did a really good video. I think it launched today about it. You can get them pretty close, and that's true. You can get them close. But if you're looking at, why you want to shoot different color profiles or why you want to shoot a certain log over the other, usually you're probably looking at it saying, hey, I want to be able to do this because I don't want to spend an entire day having to color correct multiple different shots, or I don't want to have to match cameras. I don't want to have to go through and say, hey, I need to make all these individual little tweaks to get the color, the hue, or the saturations to the exact point, or, whether or not this color shift one way or another, because all sensors have different color shifts depending on the brand that you're in. If you don't want to deal with any of that, and you happen to be working in, trying to follow the ARRI workflow, you don't do that with this. You take it, you edit it as if you're working with an ARRI camera, and you're going to be good to go. Will you see very subtle differences between the two cameras? Sure, because they're not the exact same sensor. But this is a profile that is designed from a color matrix level to ARRI LogC3 by ARRI. That's why we license it from them. It's not something that is just, we're going to throw it in there and make it ourselves, or it's not a CST in the camera from Vlog. It is actually ARRI LogC3 right into the S1II series cameras. And the fact that you can do that on the S1 Mark IIe means that if you're a fan of the ARRI color science, if you're a fan of the ARRI workflow, this is now the least expensive camera in the industry for the ARRI workflow. Full stop. And you're doing this in a camera that is hybrid design, so I can jump between photo and video, though you can't use ARRI LogC3 for photos. I can take this and I can be able to generate that look, that style, that effect that I want to go for, and not have to spend a bunch of time color matching or, adjusting to get to that point to then be able to start actually working on my edit. Aside from the fact that we have ARRI LogC3 in this camera, many of you already know we have all the tools. We have false color. We have waveform and vector scope built into the camera. We have our luminance spot meter, which I have up on the screen right now, that's showing me the stop value differences. We have, obviously, you've got histogram. We've got the fact that you've got, wrong window. We've got shutter speed or angle and ISO, so I can change in to have this set up like a cinema camera. We have what everyone loves to now all of a sudden call the Big Six menu, but we've been doing it for way longer than they have, so, maybe throw credit where credit is due when it comes to these mirrorless cameras. We have an icon-designed cinema menu. So you've got your ability to change and select all your different options through this style menu with the 6 tiles. These are things that we've been doing and bringing into the industry for years at this point. And all of this is based in a camera that has, even in the S1IIe, has dual native ISOs. You've got your 640 and 4000 dual native ISOs, depending on how you have set them. You have an auto option for the, times when you don't necessarily want to work just in a high or low ISO. You even have stuff like Master PED so that you can match your black levels to different cameras. It's a full-featured, full-set camera that depending on the type of content that you're going to create, the needs that you have as a filmmaker, cinematographer, photographer, whatever it is, the S1II in our lineup is that gateway to the S1II series platform. Again, meaning I don't need speed, or maybe speed's not as relevant to what I need to capture. Cool, go for an S1II. You get the screen, you get the viewfinder, you get the photo video switch, you get all the ability to do the raw video internally, you get the best image stabilization that you can have in the market, you get the best feature of tool sets that you can in the market, you get access to the entire L-mount alliance and an incredibly flexible lens mount for mounting PL lenses on there. You get all the anamorphic support, and most importantly, you get incredibly high-functioning open-gate video recording that we've been doing all the way back since the GH5, and only now are some starting to get close. And even there, I would still say we've got a heck of a lot better setup for how to do it. With that, everybody, I actually, unfortunately, have to end on time today. I have a couple of things I have to get to today. But thank you, everybody, for jumping in. I know this was a little bit of a different stream. I didn't get to as many questions as I wanted to during this broadcast. But like I said, we're going to be back next Friday at 2 p.m. So that's going to be on the 19th of September instead of the 18th. So we'll be live again on September 19th at 2 p.m. Eastern on YouTube here for our next regularly scheduled LUMIX Live. If there are topics that you want to have us dive into deeper, let me know. Drop it in the comment section under the video. That means I can take a look at it after the video is posted. I don't have to go through the stream and kind of timestamp where the questions are. If you've got questions that didn't get answered, drop them there. If you've got comments that you want to share to us, drop it in there. If you've got suggestions that you want us to address, drop them in there as well. If you haven't already, take a look and join us over on Discord. Discord is, if you've never used it before, Discord is a chat platform. Commonly, if you've been using if you're into video games, you've probably used or potentially used Discord before for communication. But we have an awesome community over on Discord where I'm part of it. Number of photographers and videographers, incredibly talented people are in that platform as well. There's conversations happening left and right. There's debates happening left and right about technology and pretty much everything you could think of. I encourage you to go take a look at it. There's a link down in the description so that you can get yourself over there. And who knows, maybe we're going to be continuing some of these kinds of conversations over on Discord, and you can only be part of them if you're over on the Discord platform. Other than that, everybody, thanks again for everyone's conversations in chat. I look forward to coming back next Friday at 2 p.m. Have a great day. Have a great weekend. Get out there, create some cool stuff. And I will say, while gear is awesome and newest and latest greatest things out there are sick to talk about, and they're great for everybody in the industry because it pushes things forward, go out there and create some cool stuff. Chatting online is fun, but getting out and actually creating some cool stuff with the cameras that we so passionately love to defend and chat about is, I would say, an even better thing to be doing. Yeah, and as a reminder, the Discord is linked down in the description below. With that, talk to you all later. Peace.